Hey, is there any reason that there's so much suffering in the world? And is there any point to all the suffering that you're facing? I bet there is. Let's talk about it today. I'm Jonathan Yelland, and this is Finding the Point. Hey, thanks for joining us today here on Finding the Point. I'm Jonathan Yelland, board certified behavior analyst. Guess who we've got with us today? That's right, that paragon of Baptist virtue, that victor of the excellence for Jesus Christ, Pastor Aaron Mudge. It's great to have you here today.
Wow.
My intro game is
it's
well,
yeah.
let's not make too much fun of me. But hey, it is actually good to see you. And
yeah, it's good to be here.
You know, you may have noticed we upgraded things here at Finding the Point. Got fancy
nice.
new studio. Went with the went for a Baroque style without the budget of the Baroque era. And got my family photos here. Well, not my whole family, just wedding photos. And yeah, it's nice little cozy place
good.
here.
It's a step up above the green screen we were doing.
Yeah. For those of you who may not have known, Finding the Point has been on a green screen for this whole time. I know you couldn't tell because we're so good at green screen, but no, today the walls are real, man. It's no curtain behind me now. It was very exciting to see some of these developments and the blessings God's given us to improve our camera quality, improve our sound quality, really getting the practical sets up and running. Now, I'm going to have to move my house, Aaron, away so that nobody's getting those streetcar noises as I'm talking,
right.
Because you just live in a spot where you can't get away from the traffic noises. You can't soundproof that out of your house, folks. I'm sorry. But regardless, Pastor Aaron, it's such a blessing to have these awesome improvements to the show. Now, speaking of blessings, though, I mean, I already know this, but you've been blessed to be leading the Northern Plains Conference this year.
Yeah. So the Northern Plains is a fellowship of churches in our area, and we have a Bible camp that we put on together every year, and we also have the different churches and pastors get together twice a year. And so this year for the fall conference, our church is going to be hosting it, co-hosting it along with Bethany Bible Baptist Church in Tulare, my father-in-law's church. So, and our guest speaker, I'm excited.
I bet you got somebody really good.
Is going to be our very own Jonathan Yelland.
Yeah, so we're really excited. Finding the Point gets to go to the Northern Plains Conference this year. It's going to be awesome. We actually was it our first or second video? I can't remember, but one of our very early videos was actually we called it Tales from the Northern Plains because we did interviews with people at the Northern Plains Conference.
Yeah.
Now, to be honest, the production quality is a little outdated for the show. We've come
praise
a long
the
way.
Lord, we've gotten better.
Yeah, we've got had many blessings since then. So I'm not going to recommend you go watch that video, but we're back now, coming back to the Northern Plains, almost back to where it started. And we're going to get to go there and be a blessing. We'll be presenting the Finding the Point ministry at that conference, as well as they've asked me to come share some of the things that are sort of in my area of expertise with psychology. We'll be talking depression, talking about anxiety. We're going to mention family, like training kids, dealing with kids that have autism is something I want to touch on as well. So there's several sessions that Pastor Aaron has scheduled me for, and I think it's just going to be a great time. And if you're a fan and want to come see us while we're there, it's hosted at your church. That's right, Pastor Aaron?
Yep.
Okay, so if you want more information, reach out to Calvary Baptist Church in Huron, South Dakota. Just send you have an email, Pastor, or maybe you can put your email on the screen or something.
Yeah, and our Facebook page, Calvary Baptist Church.
Fantastic.
Calvary Baptist
So definitely participate with that if that's something that sounds interesting to you. And we're all looking forward to it. That'll be just here in the next month or so. So pretty exciting stuff. Pastor Aaron, speaking of exciting, today's topic is on suffering. which is not.
Yeah, exciting.
that's real exciting, right?
So that's kind of how James puts it. Count it all joy when you face trials.
Well, that's true. That's true. So count it all joy when you do face that suffering. But the question that might not be so easy to answer is, why is there joy there in suffering? And that's count it all joy when you're suffering is an easy thing to say when you're not in the middle of suffering. And when it's really bad and you are suffering, that's not quite the sentiment that you're typically feeling.
No, it's not. And I think that, as we talk about suffering, I think it's a good thing for Christians to talk about, because the Bible, we were looking for verses to talk about this, and there's too many to use.
There really are.
And the Bible talks a lot about suffering, and there's a lot of preachers out there that, you follow Jesus, you trust him, and you obey him, and you'll have, you give to him and you'll be given back more, and you'll just, everything will go your way.
It's like that Joel Osteen prosperity gospel, or prosperity gospel. Yeah, posterity was like the gospel of your children or something. I don't even know what posterity gospel would be. But prosperity gospel, we've all heard it. Benny Hinn, that classic, what is he, 60s, 70s? Send $1 a day to Benny Hinn Ministries, and then that God will give you $20.
And that's not at all what the Bible says, because Jesus says you will suffer. You follow me, right, and you will suffer. It'll pit mother against father. It'll break up families. There will be suffering. Yeah, I think one of the things that a lot of people that are atheists, maybe, or people that object to the Bible would say, well, if God was really a good God, he would just get rid of suffering altogether. And I think we as a world, and even as Christians, don't have the proper understanding of why suffering is there and why really it can be a good thing. So
yeah, Aaron, I think you're right. It's helpful to us to reframe suffering as a good thing. But I would also say to anyone who's going through suffering, I mean, so much sympathy for you. Like, seriously, I care about you. And if you're going through a hard time right now, like, that's what I want to help with. And I'm hoping that today's show about suffering can help you deal with that suffering, because it's real and it's hard and it's real for you. Pastor Aaron, I think we put this up on the Facebook page a little bit, probably a month hence now. But the idea that people will work 4 times as hard to avoid suffering as they will to get something that they want. Right. If you would need to have an opportunity worth $40 for you to work as hard as you would work to avoid losing $10, because it's 4 times as powerful to lose something that you have than it is to get something that you don't. And what that tells us is that suffering is the worst. Okay. And there's more suffering in the world than there is not like I would say reinforcement, but I think that sounds too impersonal, Pastor. And what am I trying to say here? There's more suffering than there. I don't want to say joy, because joy is defined differently. Prosperity, maybe happiness. They're good things. There's more bad things that are going to happen to you in your life than there are good things that are going to happen to you in your life. Is that a fair way to say it, Pastor Aaron?
Yeah, probably.
I think that's real, and so the first thing to start off with, suffering, number one, is normal, and it's okay. It's going to happen to you, and that's fine. Okay. Now, nobody wants suffering. I hope that you're suffering if you are suffering, and soon. But the truth is, we are going to endure suffering. Christ endured suffering. Most of his life was just suffering. I mean, he just walked around everywhere, working all day and all night with a bunch of people who basically hated him, or were obsessed and tried to grab his clothes off his back and stuff. I mean, the guy had a really tough life, suffering the whole time, and then died in like the most creatively horrific way that the most powerful empire in the history of the world has ever devised to torture someone to death. Like, that's Christ's life, filled with suffering.
Yeah,
but
that's like the
also,
Bible says of him, man of sorrows, acquainted with grief.
yeah, absolutely. And that's Jesus' life. But he did that life and he lived that life for a meaningful purpose for us. And so I just want to point out, if you're suffering, it's not great and it's miserable, but also that's not all that there is to it. There's more to suffering than just the suffering.
Yeah.
So first thing, sympathy, empathy, whatever you want to call it. I wish you the best, and you know that God loves you too, and God wishes the best for you as well. But there's also a reason for it. So, Pastor Aaron, let's talk about some of the reasons for suffering.
Yeah.
Um, I think the first and most important reason for suffering is choice. Now, tagline of the show: choose God and God's way. That's like the whole deal is to choose God and God's way. The
Right.
Bible back here is open to Ecclesiastes, where near the end, where it says the whole duty of man, right? What's the whole duty of man is essentially translate into modern language: choose God and God's way. Fear God and keep his commandments is what it says.
Yep.
But that's essentially, we need to know what God would like us to do and choose to do that in our lives. That's the point of us. That is the point. By the way, finding the point, that's the point. Choose God and God's way. So the thing is, if there's no suffering in the world, if there's no good and bad and everything's just good, and you're never tempted and you're never challenged and you're never tried, you never are able to choose God. You're never able to choose to do right. If there's no wrong, you can't choose right.
Which is why God put the tree of the knowledge of good and evil in the Garden of Eden.
Absolutely.
Because they needed to have a choice.
Absolutely. Even in Adam and Eve's perfect garden, where everything was awesome and God made it just to be a great time for them, they still had to have something there. They still had to have, don't eat from that tree. They had to be able to choose in order to glorify God. We can't glorify God if we can't choose him and choose his way. Now, our lives now, with sin-filled world full of suffering and terrible things, gives us a much more complicated world with which to resolve those challenges. But the truth is, at the end of the day, one of the reasons that suffering exists in the world is so that we can choose God and through that glorify God. And Pastor Aaron, that isn't just for God's benefit.
No.
The opportunity we have to choose God is there so that we can have a meaning and purpose.
That's right. It's for our good and his glory.
That's right. There's some false teachings in Christianity that teach that we don't have the option to choose. God's just a spirit puppet that when you get saved, shoves his hand up there and controls your whole life. And that's it. We can't decide whether or not we're going to even be saved. It's just got to be the Holy Spirit does everything for us and we have no option. But if that's true, then there is no purpose for us. We can have no meaning as human beings because we have no opportunity to choose God.
Right.
We have no opportunity to choose anything. It's all controlled by the Holy Spirit or external forces, or we're just like meat puppets and something. I mean, that gets into the scientific moral argument side of things, I guess. But even though suffering is terrible, it's also good because it's part of a system that allows us to have meaning. And meaning defeats suffering, and it defeats depression, and it defeats a lot of things. Meaning gives us strength and power and hope and motivation, and it is the solution. It is the balm in Gilead. It's not the balm in Gilead. That's heresy. Sorry, I shouldn't say that. But it's like the balm in Gilead that that can help heal so many hurts that we have in our lives. So
it makes me think of like Paul and Silas when they were in the prison and they sang, and of course there's a lot of sermons about that they were beaten and they were enduring the pinnacle of suffering basically in this prison, and they're singing joyful to the Lord, and we as Christians talk about that. Well, we need to have joy and everything, but I really think that the reason that they could have joy, the reason that they could sing, is because they had purpose in that suffering. They knew that their suffering was there because they were serving God. They were furthering his kingdom. And so because they had a meaning and a purpose in their life, they could much more easily endure that, and they could sing praises to God.
Right. And they can feel joy, not because they are like, we're just going to take these terrible circumstances and shove that down and suppress it and plaster this joyful smile all over
Right.
everything. No, that's not what's happening. That's just not real. And people trying to do that are going to find themselves more depressed and more suffering and have more anxiety, have more problems, because that's not, well, that's a complicated because, Aaron, so I'm not going to get into that because that's like
Yeah.
5 episodes. But but you can't plaster that like suppress the reality and plaster this fake joy over it. That's just not going to work. And it's going to be harmful to you. And it's not what the Bible's calling for you to do. No, instead, you can recognize that you're suffering, but identify that that suffering is for a purpose, for an eternal purpose that really matters. And that's what Paul and Silas did. So when they're singing not because I'm actually so giddy inside and gleeful, but they're singing because they're recognizing that even in this terrible situation, I can make this choice to follow God's way. And I'm in this situation in part because that's the opportunity I've been given in order to serve God, which is what's meaningful. Right. So they're in a situation where everything's terrible, but they have an opportunity to do something meaningful and important. And they're chronicled in the Bible for it, for one. And they're blessed for it because they chose God's way, and that's what pleases God. So suffering, number one, choice. Suffering is there because you have the opportunity to choose how you'll respond to choice. And through that, you can do something that really matters.
Yeah. And I think about the purpose in the suffering too is, all of us want to know the purpose for the suffering. Like when we're enduring some hardship or trial or something terrible in our lives, the most natural question in the world for people to ask is why? Why, God? Mm-hmm. Why is this happening? And we may not know the exact answer to why did that particular thing happen, but we do know that, and I think that's kind of what we're going to get into, is that often suffering is something that is there in our life to give us a choice, but as well, it is there for a reason, for God's glory and for our good, to shape us and mold us more like Him.
Now, I like that you mentioned shape us and mold us more like Him, because that's the second thing to bring up about suffering. The thing that suffering does for us functionally as developing human beings is that suffering brings about a crisis of faith that pushes us to the next stage of moral development. So the idea is we know that Christians can be baby Christians, right? You just got saved. Even people too that aren't Christians still have moral development. And when we're born, we don't really have a strong understanding of what's right and wrong and how to know what that choice is to make. Since we know first we have to make the choice, and making the choice is what's meaningful, the second part of that moral, or the second part of responding and dealing with suffering, is what's the correct choice to make. Because if you can choose the right choice and you can understand that what you're doing is being done for a reason, knowing that you've made the right choice helps to solidify your understanding that you've done what you've done and responded to this situation for a purpose that has a meaningful reason. But how do you know what's the right thing to do? So suffering and trials, the verse says, well, Pastor, maybe you should read the verse, but the idea is that suffering and trials grow our understanding of what's right and wrong, or I would say moral development.
Yeah, so Romans chapter 5, verses 3-5 says, and not only so, but we glory in tribulations. That would be suffering. We glory in tribulations also, knowing that the tribulation worketh patience, and patience experience, and experience hope. And hope maketh not ashamed, because the love of God is shed abroad in our hearts by the Holy Ghost, which is given unto us. And we find all throughout the Bible that the trials, the suffering in our lives, that it works patience in us. And this verse says, patience, that it worketh patience, and patience brings experience, and experience hope, and hope makes not ashamed. Now, James chapter 1, verses 2 through 4 say a similar thing. It says, my brethren, count it all joy when you fall into diverse temptations. That's talking about various kinds of trials and suffering. Knowing this, that the trying of your faith worketh patience. But let patience have her perfect work, that ye may be perfect. That means complete, entire, wanting nothing. So God says that trials and tribulation, suffering are going to work patience in us, and that patience is going to bring experience and hope. And that patience is going to help complete us. Now, what kind of completion is it talking about? It's talking about being complete in Him, which would be exactly what you're talking about, Jonathan, of that moral development. I think is that as we are striving to grow closer to God, that these instances of suffering in our life, if we respond correctly to them, can and will mold us and shape us to be more like Him.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's some theories in psychology that make some humanistic assumptions on moral development, but I think we can still take those concepts but put them in a Christian framework and come to an understanding of a Christian moral development theory. So to look at that, I would like to talk about a few assumptions and some definitions first, because I want everything to be clear and technological and precise, and not just, well, I'm a dumb country preacher, but I sure know. No, we want to be smart. You can still be from the country. I love people from the country. I'm from the country. I live in the city now. But I do love people from the country. So we want to define some things and identify our assumptions. So as Christians, our moral assumptions, or maybe a way to say it academically, Pastor Aaron, is our moral theory could be described as a Christian eudaimonism. And eudaimonism, had to practice that one.
Okay,
yep,
right. I am not familiar with that term.
It's okay. I'm not like super familiar with it either. I'm in an ethics class right now, and so this is stuff. It's real fresh for me as well. Now, granted, it's not a Christian ethics class, so it's been. Well, we're not going to complain about that on the show. I'm enduring my suffering too, Pastor Aaron. Eudaimonism is a philosophy by Aquinas that essentially says that you do the right thing when you choose the correct behavior that is the right thing to do. It's based on doing the thing that is the right thing to be done, not on the results of the choice that you made, but on the actions itself. A Christian eudaimonism, and this philosophy is more like what Aquinas would teach. If you're familiar with the writings of Aquinas, I'm not super familiar because I'm not a Catholic, but he is a strong philosopher for Christian philosophy broadly. And he advocated for a Christian eudaimonism, which essentially said, well, you want to be doing the right thing so that, like the Aristotelian idea, you're going to do the virtuous thing, and doing what's right is important to being moral. And we know what's right and moral because the Bible tells us what's the right and moral thing to do. And so a Christian eudaimonism says the Bible shows us what the values are, what is virtuous. That comes from the Bible. And then we apply that Bible truth and understanding to our choices so that we're choosing to engage in actions that are true. This is also really similar to, I believe it's Christian deontology, but deontology basically says there's a certain list of what's right and wrong. Following that list of what's right is moral, and not following that is wrong. It's a little more legalistic than I think our philosophy would be. So I think we'd be more Christian eudaimonists than Christian deontologists. But there's a lot of similarity there.
Right. At the end of the day, much would go along with what we say on the show, which is to choose God and God's way.
Right,
no
exactly.
matter the
And
consequences, no matter
the
what
right
happens.
choices come from an understanding of God's word. And so the Greek you can just toss out all the Greek stuff as far as like the Greek philosophers and whatever, as long as you understand that the idea is that we're using God's word to understand what is good and right and righteous and virtuous thing to do. And then we're saying the action that we're doing itself is what's right or wrong. And what happens afterward is not relevant to the moral decision. It's atomic moral choice. That's our theory on it. The atomic moral choice theory
Right.
follows the Christian Eudaimonism idea. This is basically an Aquinas thing, but modernized and baptized because he's a Catholic and we're not going to follow. Like he's got stuff we're not going to agree with, obviously.
Right,
so,
right.
But the important part is we're going to decide what's right and wrong, not based on the results, not based on how it comes out, but on what's the right choice for you to make in that moment. What's the right behavior to do? So is it right to murder that one guy so that he doesn't go and murder like 500 other people?
Yeah,
Well,
like the
right?
whole theory that people put forth of going back in time and killing Adolf Hitler
and killing
when he was
Hitler as a baby. Yeah. So is it right to do wrong to do right? Well, some moral philosophies say yes, because the outcomes are what's important. A Christian moral philosophy says the choices that you make, and you don't make your choices by just thinking it in your head. Some things that's too complicated, but you make your choices by taking action. Sometimes that's an internal action, so I guess that would be thinking it in your head, like
Right.
thinking, "Hey, even though my sister annoyed me, I'm gonna forgive her anyways," and then taking that choice to forgive her. That's an internal action that you're taking, but you're taking the actual action. So you haven't realized your moral behavior until you've actually acted on it.
Sure.
So you can have your values, but it's not a moral action until you've acted. Atomic moral choice theory, which is our thing. Cool. We need to like write a book or something, Pastor Aaron.
With all the free time we have.
With all the free time, yeah. So it's atomic moral choice. Inside the moral theory would be Christian Eudaimonism, and so that's the presupposition we're coming to. All right, so people can contact us if you don't understand why that idea is true. But at the end of the day, the ends don't justify the means. That's the Christian position on that. Philosophers would say it's based on Christian Eudaimonism. That's Aquinas' idea. Modern Christian thinkers on this exalted show would call it atomic moral choice. Regardless,
as a pastor, I maybe didn't know Christian Eudaimonism, but I've always said, always do right, no matter the consequences, no matter what happens. It's never right to do wrong to do right, as you said. Say that 10
that's
times
right.
fast.
It's never right to do wrong to do right.
Always do right, no matter what.
All right, Pastor. And so starting with that, our assumptions here are that we're coming from this premise, choosing the right thing is the right thing to do.
Right.
Okay. That's how we perceive our moral theory. That's how we understand. So the question for us as we're developing as Christians, as we're developing in spiritual growth, is how do we derive an understanding of what is the right thing that we should be doing? Okay. So that is something that is developed through our lives. All right, so Pastor Aaron, there's several phases. There's 6. I wrote 6 phases down. This isn't like a really refined, like solid theory I'm ready to go publish in an ethics paper. This is a general idea. It's an interpretation of some of the information that is out there and refined by some people into something that's a little bit more of a Christian worldview that fits in with our Christian Eudaimonism and atomic moral choice concept. So if you can think about this, Pastor Aaron, when you're a baby, we just had our babies born. Hey, Elsie, I hope you're watching the show, but you probably aren't able to sit up to watch it. But she was born. She's very cute. Come to the conference and you can meet her. But when you're a little baby, when you're born, your understanding of what's good and what's bad is essentially good stuff doesn't get punished, bad stuff gets punished. So if I get caught, mom and dad put me in timeout or whatever they're going to do, that's bad. That was bad because I got punished. And if I did the thing and I didn't get that, I guess it was fine. And so that's how, at that young infant stage, kids are able to figure out, okay, this is what's right or wrong. And that actually can actually hold for some kids for quite a while. But eventually, they get to the point where they kind of shift their thinking into it. You recognize that sometimes I can do things that I didn't get caught for. The last time I did this, I got punished. This time, it didn't. Huh. And there's like this little crisis moment. Like, I thought the whole world worked like this. And then suddenly something happened and the world doesn't work like that anymore. There's this little crisis moment. Pastor, and I remember when I was 2 years old. This is my second oldest memory. My oldest memory is getting saved. All right, that's my first memory because I got saved very, very, very young. But I do remember it. I remember where I was and what I said and everything. And I knew what I was doing and I knew why I was doing it. But my second oldest memory is when I was a little kid and I stuck my finger in the electrical socket.
Oh.
Okay. Now you might think, he remembers that because he got shocked and learned his lesson, right? No, I remember that because it was this eye-opening moment in my life where I suddenly realized, because I stuck my finger in the electrical socket and I didn't get shocked, that my parents weren't right. My parents had always been right about everything, right? Because what got punished, my parents said, don't do this, and they punished me if I did it. And they didn't punish me if I didn't do it. So that's how I knew. And then I stuck my finger in that light socket, and it was as if I got this zap of electricity, even though I didn't. My parents were wrong. How I stuck it in there and it didn't electrocute me. They were wrong. And it was this moment of realization, this sort of crisis of my parents don't know everything. And that shifted my moral understanding. So phase 2 is it's an understanding more of what's good is rewarded. So, and even if I don't get caught, sometimes that can still be bad. So it was still bad for me to stick my finger in the light socket, but it didn't hurt me. So it was this weird moment for me as a kid. And that's why I remember it, because it's so shocking to me that I didn't get shocked. It does make me wonder, what was I thinking at 2 when I was expecting to get shocked? But I who knows?
Oh my. That explains a lot.
It's explained so much about me, right? But your second phase is what is rewarded is good. And so... And maybe sometimes there's bad things I do that don't get punished. So because I can do bad things but not get punished for it, that must mean that I know what is good by it being rewarded. So then this is your younger kids are in this sort of mindset, generally speaking.
Okay.
And they're sort of like looking for, okay, if my parents are praising me, if I'm getting treats or whatever, then that's the stuff that's good. And so that phase works for you for a while. But then another crisis comes along and you advance to the next phase. Now, the next phase is good is based on what people think of me. So Pastor, and I don't know if you have any stories that would fit for this to share, but imagine, if you will, you're in class and the teacher calls on you, oh, pick me, and you answer the question. You answer all the questions, and the teacher's rewarding you, right? Oh, good job. You're so smart, Pastor Aaron. You're such a, how'd you get to be pastor as a 5-year-old? Wow, you're so incredible. And so you're feeling great about that. And then you're done and you go to recess and all the kids are like, I don't want to talk to you. You are such a jerk because you answered all the questions and you're teacher's pet. So that creates this crisis for you. You're suffering, of course, because you're being picked on by the other kids. But that's this crisis point in your life. You're now deciding what's right and wrong, not based on your rewards, because the teacher might reward you, but you change your thinking on what do people think of me. So if people think that you're a good kid and people like you, then that must be more, whatever makes people like you and whatever makes people think you're a good person, that's what's morally right.
So
Now,
very much giving me flashbacks from high school here. But
probably this is a very high school
this very
thing.
much would be a teenage adolescent type of phase.
No, you would think
linking
that
it to development.
You would think that, Pastor Aaron. I think even some adults still live in that
Oh yeah, definitely.
level of moral development. As long as people like me, as long as people think I'm a good person, then I'm good. And the actions that I would choose would be the actions that make people think that I'm a good person.
Yeah.
And so I can determine what's the right choice based on what and this isn't even necessarily like, oh, you should be choosing the Bible, but you're choosing what the crowd thinks. Even inside good church groups with people who are trying to choose God in God's way, people may interpret what will be good by what's my church community going to think about me as a Christian based on my choice.
Yeah,
so
I definitely think that that's something that happens in churches.
Yeah, so it could be, should I buy this suit to wear to church? Well, people will think I'm a better Christian if I buy that suit, so it's a good thing for me to do. It's morally right for me to buy that so I can wear it to church, and people will think good of me. That's a real simplistic thing. It's not a big, deep moral choice. Right. There's not a lot of suffering involved in buying a suit except for the cost these days. But beyond that, it's not really that in deeper intent. So that's kind of why I'm using it as an example, because it's a little lighter to help explain the concept. But even mature adults may still be at this phase 3 of development, where it's right and wrong determined by how am I viewed by others.
Right.
Okay. The next phase after that, and in my contention here, Pastor Aaron, is each one of these phases to transition from one to the next requires a trial, requires a crisis of faith.
Okay, so that would be the link then between this moral development and the suffering that we talked about.
That's right. So in order to develop, you have to encounter, a way to frame it is you have to experience something that your current understanding cannot account for. You can't resolve it with what you currently have. And you have two options. You either expand your understanding and develop morally because of that trial and because of the suffering you're facing and because of that challenge, or you don't expand, you don't understand it, and you fall into anger and bitterness and resentment. Well, anger and resentment and then bitterness is the result. So the important thing to do here is to continue to The important thing to do here is to expand your understanding inside the framework of God's word so that you are able to, as you continue to develop, choose rightly following God's way. Now, when you're a little kid, you're not going to understand the intricate depths of like the hypostatic union or some sort of deep theological concept that who even knows what hypostatic union means. You do. Look it up if you don't know. But if you... as we learn and grow, we might only be able to do things at whatever phase we're in, but we're going to suffer and encounter challenges that are going to expand our mind beyond where we're currently at. That's the point of this.
So to me, in the Bible, then, of course, you talk about suffering, right? The one person in the Bible that's very much acquainted with suffering is Job. And Job, in Job 23:10, he said, "But he knoweth the way that I take. When he hath tried me, I shall come forth as gold." Absolutely, so Job had that understanding, even though he didn't know why he was being tried and why these horrible things happened to him. And he questioned that, and he questioned God and everything. Right. But in the end, he understood that trial, that suffering, that when God has tried me and I've come through it, I will come forth as gold. It just as gold has to go through the refining fire to get rid of all of the dross and the junk.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Job's a great example of that. Now, obviously, he's not sitting down with this phase framework that we put together for the show
No.
today. And honestly, it's just a framework, Pastor. And this is nothing I would say is really hard and fast. Like our atomic moral choice theory, that's hard and fast. I'm ready to fight anybody on that. That's just how morality works. This is just some general guidelines and principles about how you might frame your forward view as you work to develop your moral understanding. Okay. Um, so I don't want anybody to go around and say, well, I'm phase 4, you're phase 3, you're not as good a Christian. No, that's silly. So first off, the phases aren't that hard. You transition through them, but it does require a crisis of faith. It requires suffering. It requires you to encounter something that you've not been able to account for in your understanding before in order to develop and grow. Okay. So, Pastor, and if you're someone who's doing good based on what people think of me, that can be a problem when you run into people who think badly of you for doing things that are right.
Yeah.
So that's the problem.
Peer
And
pressure.
peer pressure. And you can get to the point where you recognize, especially if you've been attuned to God's word, you can recognize, man, like they all think that that's good, but I'm reading here in the Bible, it says that's not good.
Yeah.
And that I shouldn't actually be doing that, even though, that doesn't fit. And what do I do? And so that crisis where you're comparing and you're understanding God's word as what's written versus what your cultural group is, how they're viewing you as a person, the crisis of faith there, if you allow yourself to expand instead of becoming angry and bitter and resentful because you're choosing that. If you allow your consciousness to expand, you can go to the next phase, which is good is following the rules that have been established.
Okay. So it would be like coming to an understanding that no matter what the other people around me are saying, that I'm going to do what's right. Like I knowing what is right. So because I do have, for me, an example in my life.
Sure.
There was a point of crisis for me. Was uh, I was homeschooled pretty much most of my life. I had friends, in the neighborhood and everything. But when I went to public school, my junior and senior year of high school, and it was tough socially for me because people had already formed social groups, and I wanted to fit in, but it was difficult. And I was coming to a point where I remember coming to a crossroads in my life where I was beginning to at least in my mind, if not in my actions yet, but begin to turn away from the things of the Bible because because of what everyone else thought about me, and everybody thought that it was, that I was a big loser because I was waiting until marriage to
to do stuff. Sure.
to be intimate, and that I wasn't going to drink and I wasn't going to do drugs. And so and even the kind of music that I listened to and everything. And so it became, I was beginning to, at least in my mind, beginning to rebel from those things. And I remember there was a moment I was playing a video game. I won't say the name, but it was one I should not have been playing.
Okay.
Definitely shouldn't have been. And in
Candy
that game,
Crush.
you can you can have music like on your Xbox hard drive. The music that you have on there, you can play it in the game in your car and whatnot. And so I hit play, and I'm playing this game, doing it that I should not be doing, and all of a sudden this some of these Christian hymns start playing. And I remember just stopping the game right there. I pulled it out, I threw it away. It was that moment I realized I need to do right no matter what whether other people are going to accept me or not. Chasing this acceptance of others is not what is right, and it's not what God wants. And I just, for me, I to this day I remember that moment.
Yeah, and I think, Pastor Aaron, all of us who've gone through these phases, if we stop to think back through our development, we probably can ID these big crisis moments that were resolved. And it's really crazy to see how it happened, because it just opens your mind to this much greater understanding of how what's right and wrong, and how to live, and what is true and good. So it's interesting that you mentioned that, because I really think that all of us who have gone through those phases could probably think back to those big key points, like my finger in the electrical socket, you throwing away
Right.
the, yeah, it's not necessarily a big event. And once you do have that crisis moment, it does take some transition time for you to fully shift into that higher order thinking. But I think there's really these times that are just these big points that we probably, if we really stopped, could remember them.
Yeah, and
And
for me, like in that moment, of course, that moment doesn't sound like a moment of suffering, but it was. If you think back to high school, the
throwing
social
away
pressures,
your computer games, are you kidding me?
yeah, yeah, the
That
social pressures that were on me at that time in my life, it was
yeah,
definitely a moment of crisis for me, a
yeah,
moment of suffering, really. And I look
and
back on
choosing
that.
to
I look back on
go ahead.
that and see that God used that to draw me closer to him, or I guess as you
Yeah.
would put it, in the next phase of moral development.
Well, I mean, I think use "Draw Me Closer to Him" as well, because you're choosing to let go of the self in order to choose what's right. This phase 4 that I've identified, I labeled it as good is following the rules that have been established. What you're really doing at that point is you're saying, even though I'm not going to be seen as good, it's better for me to do these things that I know to be right. And you have standards that you've established for yourself, and you're going to follow those things and know to do those things, instead of doing the things that would kind of benefit you. Like, looking good for other people is generally a benefit, but doing the things that you know to be right, because they're the things that you know to be right, that's actually a really good thing. So I think, Pastor Aaron, most people, most adult Christians, generally speaking, tend to be at phase 4. This is sort of like, I have my standards, I have my list of what's right and wrong. I know what's right. This is more of that Christian deontology. I hope I'm getting it right. Deontology. I hope that's the right one. I'll feel really dumb if it's the wrong word, and maybe we can put the right definition up on the screen, or you can be like, "Yay, he's right," and there'll be balloons. I don't know, but regardless, this is the Christian deontology idea, that there are the things the Bible tells us that are right, and the things that are wrong, and we're going to choose to follow the things that are right, and we're going to avoid the things that are wrong, and that's morally good. This is a good place to be, I think. I think if you're here, this is a level of moral development that is totally acceptable. Many people can live their whole lives here, and it's not a problem. However, there are further phases of moral development. Okay. I think the dangers of this level of spiritual development, Pastor Aaron, the dangers are in the fact that the Bible does not give. The Bible is not a list of rules. Now,
No,
technologically, it is rules, but that's rule governed behavior, which is different than when I'm talking about rules generally. It's not do this, don't do that, do this, do this, do this. Oh, never do that. I mean, there is some of that in there. Some things are pretty obvious. Thou shalt not steal. Pretty simple, straightforward.
right.
But there's also much more complicated stuff than thou shalt not steal written in the Bible. And that's because life is so much more complicated than thou shalt not steal. And for many of us, we may not encounter sufficient suffering and challenges that the rules that are from the Bible, generated and given to us often in churches, that rule set can account for. A lot of times the rule sets that have been developed in our churches and in our Christian culture are actually really robust and able to account for most things that occur in most people's lives, but not everything. So that's one of the problems. The second problem is the wolves in sheep's clothing problem. So if you're in a church setting and you're living at phase 4, here's my rules and I'm going to follow them. The problem with that is you can have that wolf in sheep's clothing come in and start tossing in these extra rules that may not actually be the correct application of the Bible. Okay. And not to pick on evangelist, Pastor Aaron, but when that evangelist rolls in, like I'm coming to the Northern Plains Conference and I'm going to not do this. But when that evangelist rolls in and tells a bunch of sad stories to get you all emotional and then drops a couple things that he thinks you should do and then walks out, that gets a lot of people to come forward because it's emotional and emotions motivate. But those ideas he's presenting aren't always necessarily the right thing. Is the emotional thing not necessarily the right thing? And more modern teachers, you and I have talked about a lot of this. We're not going to call anybody out on the show, but there's a lot of writers and teachers out there that are making these intellectual arguments for very specific prescriptions on how we should live that are just not accurate to what the Bible says, but the guys who present them seem very legitimate. They seem as if they're presenting God's word and God's will and God's way in a right way, but they're not. And so if someone's at a phase 4 level of spiritual development and they're presented with those rule sets and they accept them, the problem is you can be led astray because the depth of your moral development is limited to that phase 4 level. So you're not able to go beyond the rule sets. You just have to hope and pray and trust that the rules that you've latched onto are the right ones. Which, of course, the right ones are whatever Pastor Aaron says in his church. No, I'm just kidding. Well, I'm just kidding. Even Pastor Aaron can make mistakes.
But, and it makes me think of Paul speaking in some of his epistles about how there were Judaizers that were coming into the church and saying, faith in Christ, trust in Christ, believe in him, but you also need to add these things, and you need to do these things according to the law. And so that's it made me think of that because, follow this rule set, but then you need to add these things. And they were saying things that were contrary to the gospel. And Paul really had to come down on that and call that out.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that it's important to recognize you can live a good Christian life at phase 4. I know what the rules say. I know what my standards are. And Pastor Aaron, I'm 100% behind standards. Everyone has standards, whether they recognize it or not. Even the super lefty soul liberty, sin so grace may abound guys, they have standards too. They're just far to the left, okay? Everybody has standards. You can't live your life without them because life's too complicated for us to just not pre-plan how we're going to respond to stuff. And that's all standards are. They're just, when these situations come up, this is my plan for how to interact with them. That's standards. Right. We have to have that. We will automatically have that, or else you're an idiot and you don't have your life. You don't have any plans for your life. You can't be a mature person and not have standards. But phase 4 is basically only living based off standards. And so we've got these moments that come up in our life where things can be a little more complicated and we might not have standards that can account for the challenges we're in. And when that crisis of faith comes, we have to expand beyond that. And so phase 5 is an expansion of this idea. Good is what the right thing to do in the situation is, regardless of what the rules say. This is, and then the theorists behind this would say the way this is determined is still in relation to your social group. So a way to think about this is not a real situation, but let's say your church has like a Wednesday night soul winning class. All right. And so you're out soul winning. Now your standards say, I'm going to be in church on time every service. Okay, that's your standard because the Bible says, forsake not the assembling of yourselves together. So you're like, I've got to be in church. I got to be there on time. But you're out, you're doing the soul winning thing, and you're knocking on doors, and you start talking to this guy, and you're saying, you're gonna have this conversation about God, and you're not sure where he's at. You're not sure, but he's at least talking to you, and you see that clock ticking, and you're getting close. You're like, man, if I don't leave right now, I'm not gonna make it to church on time. It's a little bit more of a gray area here, right? If I keep talking to this guy, maybe I might have an opportunity here where he's going to be open to salvation, or at least considering, where he's, some development along the path of planting and watering and reaping the spiritual harvest of salvation for this guy. But also you need to be in your church service. So you have these two conflicting rules, right? It's right and good to do soul winning activities and to try to help lead this guy to Christ. But also church is starting. And both of those things are really important to do. And so at phase 5, that's where you're sort of like, I've mastered the understanding of what the rule sets are, and I've understand my standards so well that I can take that next step and determine what's good for this situation. It's no longer just, I'm going to follow these strict rules. It's that I've got a situation that's a little more complex, and I understand the best application of those rules. But you're determining in some sense based on social relations. So someone who may be in that situation will be like, well, I've got these two conflicting rules. But if I can go into church a little late, but say, hey, I got to witness to this guy, then that's going to be better for me, because that would be seen as the right thing to do by our church social group. Or maybe you got like a really strict church that's kind of like more legalistic, old school. They'd be like, no, you better be here right on time. Then maybe you would choose like, you know what, this guy's not getting anywhere. Shut it down. We're heading back to the church, because that one's more important in our church, like in our church social group. That rule has more value. And so I'd be like, well, you know what? Hey, let's talk next time. I'll see you. I'll come by and stop next week and we can talk some more. But the church service is starting, so I'll gotta go. See ya. Okay, so depending on what priorities your social group give to those different rule sets, you may prefer one over the other. Maybe this isn't a very fair example, because I think most of us are going to be in a church group that would value someone getting saved while you're out doing Wednesday night soul winning.
If your church group doesn't value that, maybe it's time
I think those are some weird priorities. So maybe it's not the best example.
So then this principle, then, would this be the idea? So the Bible talks about the spirit of the law and the letter of the law.
I think personally, yeah, kind of. So I think personally, this is where it's almost a transitionary stage, but this is where you're understanding the rules to the degree that you can determine when there's conflicts between them, which one's more valuable, or which one is the correct. So
they're both right, but which one is more right?
Kind of, yeah. That's kind of what. In the challenge is, though, at this phase, you're determining which one's more right based on what your group is most likely to perceive as being right. So not that I'm doing this to impress other people. That's more of that like phase 3. But phase 5 is more like, I kind of know what the right thing is to do, because this is mostly what most of the people I know would think is the right thing to do. So it's like your framework is based on knowing what the right behaviors in the situation are. But if there's conflict, you sort of pull in from that social group's general understanding of values to identify what's most important. So if like you got the choice between your mom's in the hospital with cancer on Saturday, like she just went into the hospital, or taking care of your bus route, with going and doing your bus route calls on Saturday, or going to the hospital with your mom, both family values are huge, but also your bus route is huge and really important. So like, what's your group think? Now in my church, and my church's understanding of values there, they'd be like, call somebody to cover your bus route, get over there and help your mom. That would be totally accepted. But I know in like some of those late 60s, 70s bus route programs, it'd be like, your mom can die for all we care. You better be out there getting your bus kids in. Like there's some of that attitude out there back then with those guys.
Yeah.
And so if you were in that group, you're like, I have a conflict in rules, and I understand the rules aren't the end all of morality. So I'm going to do what's the best thing in this difficult situation, and I'm going to know sort of where the values of my cultural group are at in order to help me determine which values are most significant. Is that clear?
Yeah.
I think honestly, in that situation, I'm still probably going to go see my mom in the hospital. But it's possible you'd be in a situation where that's different. So I think phase 5 is a transitional stage to phase 6. Phase 6 is there's universal principles that can be applied to unique and unknown scenarios. Phase 6 is basically, I understand the principles of God's word. I understand and have a comprehensive, full knowledge of the Bible and the values of the Bible and God's word. And so because I understand all of that, I can make my decisions based off that understanding of what is right and wrong, as opposed to needing to pull from my peer group. Okay. You pull from the peer group because that's all that you can access at phase 5. You're like, I don't really know everything well enough to know, but it's sort of like maybe in college you got a tricky situation and or even not on a college, maybe with your family or whatever. I've got a tricky situation. I'm not entirely sure how to handle it. I know that as one of these two things are the right thing to do, they both seem good. I'm going to go ask my pastor, or I'm going to go ask my grandpa. My grandpa's great man, full of good advice. I'm going to go ask, I'm going to go call Finding the Point and ask those guys, what should I do in this tough situation? And that's when you're looking to that social group for some answers, because you just haven't quite developed your moral understanding to the degree that you really know. And so you're looking to other humans who might have that knowledge to support you. In phase 6, you kind of have had that life experience. You've had the Bible experience. You know what God's word is, and you've lived your life a little bit so that you understand these moral principles to the degree that you can apply them in any situation that comes up. That's a very high level of moral development, and the number of people who make it to that level is very, very, very few. Now, honestly, most people stay at level 4. Your really mature Christians, like your top mature Christians in your church, may hit level 5, or be budding into level 5. But most people are living at level 4. Sometimes we're getting in 5. Very, very, very few people hit phase 6. Having that full, deep understanding of the Bible knowledge and being able to transcendently apply it to any scenario that comes up, that's just really difficult to get to that far. It really is mature development that I think we can all aspire to, but recognize, I mean, you may be 70, 80 years old and haven't spent your whole life in the church and in the Bible and still not quite have gotten there because it's just so hard to get to.
Yeah.
But that is a goal to aspire to. Now, Pastor Aaron. Go ahead.
I'm just thinking too, because like there may be some areas where, I do have a Bible knowledge, and so if there's a question of in this particular area that would come up, I would know what the answer is, like you say, based on but then there's another area over here I'm not sure.
Right.
And so
that's
to
why
me,
it's so hard.
I'm seeing there's a lot of error. I mean, to be able to say that's where you are in all areas of life, boy,
it really would be a very serious, incredible level of moral development.
But once you hit phase 6, you're done, right? You've arrived.
There is a theoretical phase 7, but it's essentially like, I know what God's thinking. So like the psychology guys that came up with the psychology version of this that's not aligned to Christian values, although they kind of admitted we were kind of like doing it based off a Christian moral ethical viewpoint, but we're not going to say that because we want to get published. Those guys identified there's possible a phase 7, but the phase 7 really would be like, I actually know what God's thinking. So it's not realistically possible, but it would be
from a biblical perspective.
That's what it would look like.
I would say you could maybe say maybe there's a parallel between that and um in Christian growth in sanctification. At some point
Hmm.
we come to glorification, which would be, it doesn't happen until we are in that glorified body in the presence of God. So
I didn't come prepped
maybe
on the progressive sanctification literature today, Pastor Aaron. I'd love to do that in another episode, but it sounds good. So yeah, those now, Pastor, and I say all that, we go into the phase theory in part because I think Christian moral development is just a fascinating concept to structure, and I think it's valuable to us to sort of assess what phase are we in. Be honest with yourself if you're assessing it. You're probably phase 3 or 4. Most people are. Maybe you're hitting phase 5 if you've been around the block for a bit and you're really developing. And trying to really expand your understanding of God's word. But and basically, if you think you're phase 6, you're not probably. Um, but to recognize too, Pastor Aaron, the way that we do develop that is through suffering. It is through trials. The only way you get to having a universal understanding of how to respond to with God's way to everything is by having suffered enough that you've needed to pull on the strength of God's word and have that understanding of what God's word says so much that you have developed that full comprehension, because you don't get to go from phase 1 to the phase 2 or from any of the phases to any of the other phases by just having a grand old time and sitting there on your couch and having grapes fed to you. That's just not, spa treatment. Spa treatment isn't what builds moral development. The thing that builds moral development is being out there on the front lines, being a soldier for Christ, suffering through it and suffering for it, fighting for God's word and God's way. And as you're doing that, encountering those problems and challenges, that each one of those trials, each suffering moment that you go through, if you're choosing to use that suffering for God's way and for your moral development and choosing rightly, that is building and expanding your mind. It's a closed-minded person who thinks, well, if I didn't get caught, it's okay. That's your phase 1. That's like a little baby's mind of morality. Right. That's a closed-minded person. An open-minded person is one who's saying, hey, this is a real tricky situation, but I understand that this value is what's important to God, and I'm going to live by that. And I'm going to choose my options based around that philosophy.
Yeah.
The only way you get there is through miles and miles and piles of suffering.
Yeah. So I have a couple passages that
yes, please,
that kind of bring that out too. 2 Corinthians 4:16-18 says, "For which cause we faint not, but though our outward man perish, outwardly we suffer, yet the inward man is renewed day by day. For our light affliction, which is but for a moment, worketh for us a far more exceeding and eternal weight of glory. While we look not at the things which are seen, but at the things which are not seen. For the things which are seen are the temporal, but the things which are not seen are eternal." So, and this is, we've talked a lot in the past about eternal versus temporal things, and this moral development, the suffering brings these steps of maturity along. These are eternal things. These are things that are going to last, because we are eternal beings.
Suffering is how a Christian grows. So it's not good. It's not fun. And once again, sympathy/empathy, whatever the thing you feel best coming from before. I mean, we feel that. I really do. I genuinely care about people. I mean, my whole life and job and even this show is there for people because I care about people and want them to have the best they can have. But recognize too, so I sympathize with anyone dealing with suffering, but I want to also give you the hope. Part of the suffering, beyond being just the atomic moral choice option you have to choose God and have a blessing for choosing God right now, the suffering that you're going through right now also is expanding your mind and your understanding of the world, and it's building your moral development and allowing you to ascend through that these 6 phases if you want to take the phase program, but ascend your understanding so that you are a stronger, more robust, spiritually open person. And I don't mean open as in I'm open to take whatever in, but like open as in vast, open understanding of the depth of the world that God has put us into and made for us.
Yeah.
That only comes from the suffering. And
that's right.
The suffering hurts, but it is that opportunity that's giving you strength and growth as well. So it's bad, but it's not all bad.
And the beauty of that is God knows that. So God allows suffering in our lives, but God also gives us strength in those times of weakness and in those times of suffering. And so this isn't something we should be seeking to really, we're talking about a crisis of faith. What you're meaning is you come to a crisis and we turn to God. And so to me, a passage that I think the Apostle Paul really was a bit transparent in this about some issues of suffering in his life. And in 2 Corinthians 12, 7 through 10, it says, "And lest I should be exalted above measure through the abundance of the revelations, there was given to me a thorn in the flesh." We don't know what it was. Many people theorize, but it doesn't matter. He has a thorn in the flesh. "The messenger of Satan to buffet me, lest I should be exalted above measure. For this thing I besought the Lord thrice, 3 times, that it might depart from me. And he said unto me, My grace is sufficient for thee, for my strength is made perfect in weakness. Most gladly, therefore, will I rather glory in my infirmities, that the power of Christ may rest upon me. Therefore I take pleasure in infirmities, in reproaches, in necessities, in persecutions, in distresses, for Christ's sake. For when I am weak, then I am strong." And it's through these things that God changes us and molds us more into his image. But at the same time, it's these moments of weakness when we say, God, I can't do this. That God says, you're right, you can't. I can't. If you rely on my strength, that's when you'll be strong. And that's what Paul is saying.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, Pastor Aaron, I am noticing here that sadly we are way out of time on this episode today. So thank you for those verses. And just once again, everybody, we're looking for your suffering to have some meaning because you've chosen God's way through it, and also growth as your moral development is strengthened by those trials of faith that work with your patience and expand your understanding of yourself and God and how you live and act in the world. Pastor Aaron, it's time. Go ahead and give us your final challenge.
Well, obviously, we're talking about suffering. The challenge obviously isn't go find suffering, but because it will find you. But understand the purpose of suffering and understand that God can use that to help you to grow in him, and it can be used for a good thing. But I think that it's important to remember too that how we respond, our attitude towards the suffering, we can choose to become angry and bitter towards God because of the suffering he allowed, or we can choose to understand that God's using this to work for good in our lives, and we can choose, even though we don't know what is going on, we can choose him. And so that would be my challenge, would be whether you're in suffering or you will be, to make sure to choose God's way and to choose God in this, and to have the right choice so that God can use this suffering to help you to grow.
Thank you, Pastor Aaron, for the final challenge. And thank you for watching us on Finding the Point today. Hey, if you'd like, go ahead and leave us a comment. Maybe tell us what phase 1 through 6 you think you're in. Maybe we can throw up a quick picture of the phases just to help people who want to do that comment out here real quick. But thanks to all of you for watching. Thank you to our sponsors over at Calvary Baptist Church in Huron, South Dakota. Go ahead, like, share, subscribe, and all that stuff. Maybe even go to our Facebook page if you feel like it. We'll see you guys later. Get out there, choose God and God's way.